They say the night the masters fell, even the stars refused to watch. The sky was a curtain of black smoke, pierced only by the screams of the dying and the roar of freedom tearing through the air like a storm long denied. Beneath the blood moon, the drums that had been banned for a generation beat once more, furious, primal, and defiant. The ground itself trembled under bare feet and broken chains as the slaves, once silent, once obedient, rose from the ashes of their ancestors and became gods of vengeance. Among them stood Ekene, bare-chested, bloodied, his hands soaked in the life of his oppressors, his eyes fixed on the white mansion where his torment began. In one hand he held a shattered staff, the symbol of colonial power, and in the other, a machete still dripping with the memory of rebellion. Around him the fallen lay, friend and foe alike, blanketed by firelight and sorrow. This is not a story of justice. This is not a tale where freedom comes without cost. This is the story of how the forgotten dared to rise, and what it cost them all. This is the story of the slaves' rebellion. The night air was thick with the scent of sweat, firewood, and bitter secrets. Deep in the heart of Oduma village, beneath the towering palm trees and sprawling moon, the slave quarters groaned with whispers. The moon, full and unblinking, seemed to listen as the broken ones plodded quietly among the sleeping goats and shadows. Ekene, the blacksmith's slave, leaned in close to Nwoke, his eyes burning with the fire of something more than rage. "Tonight we bleed them," Ekene whispered, his voice hoarse but firm. "For every back that broke under the cane, for every mother who watched her child taken, we give them their own sorrow." Nwoke, the eldest among them, ran a hand over the scars on his neck. His voice trembled. "You speak of blood, Ekene. Do you understand the weight of what you call for?" Ekene did not flinch. He simply stared at the horizon, where the master's house sat like a bloated spider above the land. "Yes," he said, "and I know they will never let us live free. So we carve freedom with fire." By the glow of a single oil lamp, the rebellion was sealed. In the dirt floor of the old yam barn, a ring of slaves stood barefoot, their skin glistening from the heat and years of cruelty. One by one, they pricked their fingers with the tip of Ekene's blade and let the blood fall into a shallow clay bowl. Blood meant unity. Blood meant war. "We swear by the spirits of our mothers," intoned MMA, the cook's assistant whose child had died from a master's disease, "that tonight we choose death over chains." "And we swear," added Nwoke, his voice gruff but proud, "that if we fall with our hands bloody and our names cursed by our oppressors." Uche, a boy of barely 15 who once saw his brother whipped to death for stealing cassava, held the bowl up to the sky. "Let the gods see us. Let them hear our cries. Let them guide our blades. Even if we die, let them not forget us." Chief Obiajalu, the head of the slaveholding clan, sat under the wide veranda of his compound, sipping palm wine and laughing with his guests. Fat-bellied men with wide teeth and cruel hands, they spoke of taxes, trade, and the price of flesh as if they were discussing yams. None of them noticed the growing stillness that spread through the night like fog. "Did you hear," one of them chuckled, "that the boy they caught trying to escape died before he even got a second lash? Weak things, these children, not built like they used to be." Obiagela grunted. "If you feed a dog scraps, it forgets it has teeth. These ones are well fed enough. I don't need them to be brave. I need them to be obedient." From the shadows, Ekene watched them. He knew the layout. He knew the guards. He knew where the wives slept, where the children played, and where the weapons were kept. They were not warriors, these masters. They were lords of ease and gluttony. "When the drum sounds," he whispered to his brothers hidden behind the plantain grove, "we go in. No mercy. No hesitation. No survivors." A single drumbeat shattered the silence. It came from the hills where no drum had sounded in years. The masters froze, their laughter dying in their throats. Obiagelu stood slowly, his hand going to the dagger at his waist. "Who sounds that drum?" he asked. But before an answer came, the gates burst open. "To arms! To arms!" one of the guards shouted. But it was too late. Flames rose behind the figures of the rebels as they stormed into the compound. MMA had set the outer storehouses alight. Ekene was already on the porch, blade raised high. The knight screamed. Uche ran beside him, a burning torch in one hand, a machete in the other. "For my brother! For my blood!" The masters died badly. Some tried to fight, but their hands were too soft and their hearts too slow. Others tried to run but found their paths blocked by slaves who had once served them porridge and bathed their feet. Chief Obiagelu fought with fury. He slashed Uche across the face before Ekene drove a spear through his gut. As Obiagelu fell, his blood pouring over the ivory tiles of his great hall, Ekene whispered, "Do you remember the girl who died screaming in your granary? This is for her." Obiagelu gurgled blood, reaching for Ekene's throat. "You are still a slave," he hissed. Ekene twisted the spear. "No," he said, "not anymore." The smoke rose high into the night sky, a signal as bright as a call to war. From nearby hamlets, villagers stirred in confusion. Children cried as their fathers looked toward Oduma with dread in their eyes. Some muttered prayers, while others saddled horses and rode to warn the council. In the silence of her hut, the widow Nena clasped her pendant of carved ebony. Her son had been sold years ago to Chief Obiagelu. Her tears fell freely. "Let them burn," she whispered. "Let them all burn." But from across the river, the guards from the colonial post had already taken notice. The commandant, a sharp-eyed man named Captain Langley, tightened his belt and said coldly, "Mount the horses. If there's rebellion, we put it down. Hard." The slave rebels danced under the moonlight, not in celebration but in mourning and fury. Bodies of former masters smoldered in the ruins, and the scent of scorched silk and flesh clung to the air. Ekene stood shirtless, his body smeared with ash and blood. "We are free now," he told them. "But freedom is never given. It is always taken. And they will come." Nwoke stepped forward, dragging a musket taken from the master's vault. "Let them come. This time we die on our feet. We die with our ancestors watching." MMA, gripping a bloodied kitchen cleaver, added, "They burned my child in fever. Now I will burn their world in return." MMA moved through the wreckage of the compound, searching for survivors who might have hidden during the rebellion. In the nursery, she found a girl, barely 6, curled beneath a broken bed frame. The child sobbed, calling for her mother. MMA paused. Her hands trembled. Then she turned and walked away. "No mercy," she whispered to herself. But the child still lived. Later, Ekene saw her near the yam stores, her face pale and voice dry. "You spared the girl." "I did," MMA replied. "Because we are not them. Because someone must live who remembers differently." From the east came the thunder of hooves and metal. Captain Langley led a dozen colonial soldiers, each armed with rifles and discipline. They wore red jackets and cold faces. Behind them came local warriors paid in cowries and gin. "We make an example," Langley ordered. "One village burns so the rest never rise." By dawn they reached Oduma, and they saw the smoke, and they loaded their guns. Ekene stood on the ash-covered hilltop, the charred compound behind him, and his people gathered below. His voice rang clear. "The white men are coming, and with them the old chains." Nwoke placed his musket in the dirt and lifted a carving of Amadioha, the god of thunder. "We fight not just for today, but for every tomorrow that was stolen." Uche, face still bloodied from Obiagelu's blade, shouted, "Then let them come. If they want to chain our bodies, let them wade through our blood first." And so they prepared. Spears were sharpened. Traps were set. The rebellion would not die quietly. The rebels gathered in the ruins of the master's granary, now repurposed as their war room. The night wind carried the scent of gunpowder and charred wood. Ekene sat on a broken stool, the spear of Obiagelu beside him. Around him were the blood-marked, the wounded, the vengeful. "We cannot run," Nwoke said firmly. The bush will not hide us. The forest is no friend to the hunted. Then we die here, said MMA. But not as animals. We make them remember this hill. We make them fear the fire of those they once beat. Uche leaned forward. They come with guns. We have blades and stolen muskets. If we strike from the shadows, use the trees, the walls, the terrain, we can make them pay dearly. Ekene nodded slowly. We do not fight to live. We fight so that our screams reach beyond the grave. Let them echo into history. The little girl Adora was still alive. She sat quietly beside the yam shed, her doll clutched to her chest, her eyes too wide for her face. She had not spoken a word since her mother died in the flames. MMA brought her roasted maize wrapped in plantain leaf. The child stared. Eat, MMA said softly. You are not our enemy. You are what comes after. Adora took the food but did not speak. Behind her, Uche scoffed. She should not be here. She will remember. And when she grows up, she may want vengeance. MMA stood. Her eyes burned. Then let her remember. But let her remember kindness too. Let one thing live without hate. The morning sun revealed them. Red jackets against the green hills, rifles gleaming like death's teeth. Captain Langley stood atop his horse, one eye scanning the smoldering compound. Barbarians, he muttered. They tore their masters apart. This is what happens when you let cattle dream. Beside him, a local interpreter, Ozoemena, shifted uneasily. They are desperate, sir. But clever. I fear they will not die easily. Langley sneered. Then we make it easier. Send a rider back. I want reinforcements. And burn anything that looks like a home. From the hills above, Ekene watched. His hands gripped a spear. They are here. The beasts wear coats of red. At the narrow pass beside the dried riverbed, the rebels waited in silence. When the first column of soldiers entered the choke point, Nwoke gave the signal, a bird call sharp and quick. A rain of arrows fell from the rocks. Spears followed. The soldiers screamed, stumbling over one another, confusion in their ranks. Then the rebels fell upon them. Uche darted through the chaos, slashing at legs and rifles. One soldier aimed a musket at MMA, but Adora, unseen by many, threw a stone that knocked the barrel aside. The shot fired harmlessly into the sky. The child fights with us now, MMA whispered, swinging her cleaver into the soldier's side. The battlefield reeked of gunpowder and blood. Langley stood over a wounded corporal, teeth clenched. How many did we lose? 7, sir. And 2 missing. Langley spat. Bring in the cannon. Enough games. Burn them to ash. As the iron beast was rolled in, Ekene gave new orders. Fall back into the ruins. Let them think we retreat. Then strike from the sides. Bleed them from the shadows. Nwoke laid a hand on his shoulder. We cannot win this. Ekene met his gaze. We don't need to win. We only need to haunt them. Night fell again, and the rebels gathered in what remained of the Master's prayer hall, the sacred place the colonials once claimed to bless their cruelty. Now it reeked of soot and iron. Ekene stood at the front, pacing. They come with fire and iron. But so do we. In our hearts, in our blood, he declared. Nwoke sat wearily, a bandage wrapped around his thigh. Our numbers shrink, Ekene. We lost 5 today. MMA wiped her cleaver on her wrapper, her eyes dim. I do not fear death. But I fear being forgotten. You will not be forgotten, Adora said suddenly. All heads turned to the little girl. Her voice was small, but her eyes held fire. I will remember. I will tell. One day, when they ask why the earth trembled, I will say your names. The room fell silent, and then Uche stood. Then let us fight until only names remain. Among them was one whose heart had wavered. Obinna, a former house servant, had tasted comfort, even kindness from the Master's second wife. And fear had eaten him slowly since the rebellion began. That night he crept from the camp, dodging traps and ash. At the edge of the village, he was found by colonial scouts. Spare me, he whispered. I can lead you through their defenses. I know where they sleep. I know where they hide. Langley narrowed his eyes. And why should I trust a rat that turns on its nest? Because rats always run toward the crumbs. And I want to live. That is all. Langley smiled grimly. Good. You will live. Until I no longer need you. Obinna led them under moonless skies, his path winding through tall grass and old goat tracks. In the ruined granary, the rebels were resting. They had no idea the forest itself was now watching them with foreign eyes. MMA stirred in her sleep. She sat up, unease, tightening her chest. Something's wrong. The silence is wrong. Ekene had not slept. He stood at the doorway, staring into the dark. I feel it too. Wake the others. Quietly. As Uche moved toward the sleeping line, the first musket cracked through the night. A boy beside him fell, his chest opened by steel and smoke. Ambush! Ekene roared. To the trees! Gunfire exploded from the tree line. Flames licked at the dry thatch of the granary roof as the rebels scattered like birds from a storm. Langley watched from afar through a spyglass, expression unreadable. Drive them into the open, he ordered. No prisoners. Burn the ground they walk on. Uche pulled Adora into the bushes, shielding her with his body. Run when I say, he whispered. No looking back. MMA fought like a lioness, cleaving through two soldiers before a shot took her in the side. She fell, gasping. Ekene rushed to her. Go, she said, blood bubbling on her lips. Remember me in fire. He kissed her forehead and stood. I will burn the sky for you. The rebels fell back to the old yam pits, hollowed earth tunnels once used for hiding food during droughts. Now they were graves waiting to be filled. Nwoke coughed blood, his wound infected. How many of us are left? Ekene counted slowly. 12, including Adora. Then let us carve our names into the bones of this land, Uche said. If we must fall, we fall with our teeth in their necks. They spent the night digging traps, stringing vines, and preparing poisons. The last stand would not be silent. As dawn approached, Ekene looked to the sky. Ancestors, he whispered, guide our blades. Witness our end. The fire from the granary still crackled when the survivors regrouped in the hidden yam pits. Adora sat beside Uche, trembling, soot on her cheeks. Ekene stood near the entrance, his hand on his spear. I saw someone guiding them, Adora whispered suddenly. He had our face. Not theirs. Ekene turned sharply. What do you mean? He was dark like us, she said, her eyes fixed on something only she could see. He smiled at them, pointed, showed them the way. Uche swore under his breath. Obinna, I should have known. He always looked back too long at the master's house. As if he missed the leash. Ekene's face hardened. We found him. We bring his soul to justice. The trail led them through charred cassava fields and broken fences. Blood marked the grass. Obinna had fled, but not far. The rebels hunted him like a wounded animal. They found him near the river bend, drinking water from a rusted tin. He saw them and froze. Please, he said, standing slowly. I did what I had to. They promised to spare me. Ekene stepped forward. You led them to our mothers, our children. Your fear became our death. Obinna fell to his knees. I didn't think they'd kill so many. I thought they only wanted to capture. Uche snarled, unsheathing his blade. You thought wrong. And now you'll bleed with the rest. But Ekene raised his hand. No. Let the spirits judge him. We leave him tied to the old Irako. Let him face the night alone. That night clouds swallowed the moon. The wind carried the scent of sorrow. Nwoke groaned in his sleep, fevered and delirious. They're here, he muttered. The red ones riding smoke. Ekene sat beside him, placing a damp cloth on his brow. Rest, old friend. You will not die alone. I dreamt of the village before all this, Nwoke whispered. Of drums and millet porridge. Of laughter. I remember that sound, Ekene said softly. It will return one day. If not in our time, then in the stories they tell. Outside, Adora watched the shadows. They are closer, she whispered. I can feel it in the ground. At dawn, the last 12 rebels stood in a circle. Ekene addressed them. This is the end, he said. Not of our lives, but of our fear. Today we die as warriors, not as chattel. Uche grinned, a cruel smile beneath blood-crusted cheeks. Let them write that in their history books. Let them remember what it cost them. Matsi, a young boy no older than 13, raised a shaking hand. If I fall, who will say my name? I will, said Adora, stepping forward. I remember all your names. They touched their foreheads in turn. Not just comrades now, but brothers, sisters, martyrs in waiting. The colonial forces came with banners high and cannons roaring. Smoke curled from the trees as explosions rocked the forest. But the rebels fought with the fury of gods. Ekene led the charge, spear slicing through red cloth and pale skin. Uche flanked the gunners, dragging one into the pit and snapping his neck with bare hands. Adora hid behind a fallen log, her arms wrapped around Matsi's lifeless body, tears streaking down her ash-covered face. Langley, atop his horse, shouted into the chaos. Cut them all down. Show no mercy. One soldier hesitated as he raised his rifle toward a wounded Nwok. Nwok met his eyes and smiled. You will remember me in your dreams. The shot rang out. Another soul returned to the ancestors. The battlefield smoldered. Rebel bodies lay among broken rifles and shattered helmets. Ekene, wounded and breathless, crouched behind the broken remnants of the yam pit wall. Uche found him, clutching his stomach where blood soaked his cloth. You need to move, Uche said. They're regrouping. Ekene shook his head slowly. My legs, they won't carry me now. I am rooted, like the Irako. This is where I fall. Adora ran to them. No, you can't leave us, Ekene. Not now. Not like this. He smiled at her, his lips pale. Child, your eyes have seen too much. But you will live. You are the voice left behind. To Uche, he said, bury me under the tree where we made our first vow, where we broke the master's staff. Let my bones rot in freedom. Uche and Adora dragged Ekene's body through the smoke, shielding it from scavengers and vultures. When they reached the tree stump, Uche began to dig with his bare hands. I never believed in spirits, Uche muttered. But if they exist, they must have sung when you were born. Adora helped scoop the earth. I'll keep him alive in my stories. Every word, every battle, every name. When they finished, Uche placed Ekene's broken spear atop the grave. Rest, brother, he whispered. You carried us farther than hope. That night, they lit a small fire and ate roasted yam in silence. Every mouthful tasted of loss. Langley paced through the carnage, his boots soaked in blood. How many escaped? He barked at the scout. 3, maybe 4, the man stammered. But they'll be dead before nightfall. We've sealed the forest. Langley's eyes burned. I want every inch of this cursed land searched. I want no rebel name left to echo. Beside him, Ozoemena stared at the bodies. They died with dignity. You won't kill the story. Langley turned, face flushed. Stories can be erased. Just like villages. Ozoemena whispered under his breath. And tyrants can be remembered only in curses. Uche, wounded and limping, sat by a stream, his back to a stone. Adora tended to his leg with leaves and herbs. You should go, girl, he muttered. Find a quiet life. Grow old and forget this nightmare. I can't forget, she replied. Their names live in me. Obiajalu, MMA, Ekene, Matsi, Nwok, even you. He chuckled weakly. Then speak to them out loud, Adora. Loud enough that the wind will carry them past mountains. Suddenly, horses were heard in the distance. Uche gripped his blade. Go. Now. Run. Tell them all what happened here. Adora hesitated, then kissed his forehead. You were the lion's roar. Adora ran through the forest, heart pounding like ancestral drums. Behind her, she heard Uche's final scream, defiant and loud enough to shake the birds from the trees. She did not stop. not even when the smoke burned her eyes or when branches tore at her skin. She ran until the trees thinned, until the sky opened, until silence returned. Years later, in another village far away, people would gather to hear her speak. She wore white, her hair threaded with gray. And she would say, "I was there. I saw it. I heard them sing as they burned. I carry their names." The night the masters fell, the sky wept. But so did the ancestors, because their children had remembered how to fight. And in every ear, in every tear, the rebellion lived on.